The small apartment was quiet, except for the sound of coughing. A young mother lay on a thin bed, her face pale, her body weak. She had once been full of energy, always rushing between jobs to keep food on the table for her little girl. But now, sickness had taken her strength. Each day seemed harder than the last. Beside her sat her daughter, no more than 8 years old, with wide eyes full of worry. She held her mother's hand tightly. "Mama, are you okay?" she asked softly. The mother tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "I'm fine, baby. Just tired." But the truth was, she was not fine. Medicine was expensive and work had become impossible. Bills piled up, and food on the table grew less each week. Yet in the middle of all this, hope still lingered. The mother had applied for a job at a big company. It was not just any job. It was one that could change their lives. She had been invited to meet the CEO himself, a rare chance for someone from her background. She had spent days preparing, ironing her old blouse, practicing what she would say, and praying for strength. But now, lying weak in bed, she knew she could not go. Her chest ached, and standing felt impossible. Tears welled in her eyes, not because of the sickness, but because she feared this chance slipping away. Her daughter watched her closely. The little girl had grown up faster than most children her age. She knew about struggles, about her mother's sacrifices, about nights when her mother skipped meals so she could eat. She also knew about the job interview. She had heard her mother whispering prayers about it at night. "Don't worry, Mama," the girl said suddenly, her voice steady. "I'll go instead." The mother turned her head weakly, shocked. "You? But you're just a child." "I know," the little girl said, her chin lifted bravely. "But I can tell them you're sick. I can tell them how hard you work, how kind you are. Maybe they will listen." The mother wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. How could a child walk into the office of a powerful millionaire CEO? Yet looking into her daughter's eyes, she saw determination, a fire that sickness could not put out. That night, while her mother rested, the little girl prepared. She chose her neatest dress, the one her mother had sewn from leftover fabric. It was simple but clean. She brushed her hair carefully, tying it with a small ribbon. She found a pair of shoes that were slightly too big, but polished them until they shone. Early the next morning, the girl woke before the sun. She kissed her mother's forehead and whispered, "I'll make you proud, Mama." Her mother tried to stop her, weakly reaching for her hand. "It's too much, my child. You don't understand that world." But the girl only smiled. "Maybe they'll understand me." With that, she left the tiny apartment and stepped into the busy streets of the city. Cars honked, tall buildings stretched into the sky, and people in suits hurried past her. She felt small among them, but her heart was steady. She carried nothing with her but courage. No résumé, no polished shoes, no formal speech. Only the truth in her heart and the words her mother had taught her, honesty, kindness, and never giving up. As she walked toward the giant glass building where the CEO's office was located, she felt nervous, but she kept whispering to herself, "For Mama, for Mama." Other children her age were probably in school or playing with toys. But this little girl was about to walk into a world of marble floors, gold elevators and business suits, a world that did not expect her, but one she was determined to face. Back in the apartment, the mother lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Her heart raced with fear and pride. She prayed silently, "Please let someone see the goodness in my child. Please let them see her courage." Neither of them knew yet how much this one act would change their lives forever. The little girl was about to step into the office of a man who held power, money, and influence. A man used to dealing with adults, contracts, and profits. He was not expecting a child to walk in that day, but sometimes miracles wear small shoes and carry innocent hearts. And so the stage was set. A sick mother, a brave little girl, and a meeting that would bring two worlds together in a way no one could have predicted. The morning sun reflected off the glass towers of the city as the little girl made her way to the tallest one. The skyscraper looked enormous, like a mountain made of silver and light. For a moment, she stopped at the sidewalk and tilted her head back, staring up at the endless windows. Her tiny reflection appeared in the shiny glass doors, and she whispered to herself, "Don't be scared. This is for Mama." She took a deep breath and pushed the heavy door open. Inside, the building was grander than anything she had ever seen. The floor gleamed like polished mirrors, and chandeliers sparkled from the ceiling. Men and women in dark suits hurried past her, clutching briefcases, speaking into phones, and tapping their watches as if every second was worth gold. The little girl, in her simple dress and polished but oversized shoes, stood out immediately. She clutched the strap of her small bag and walked toward the front desk. Behind it sat a woman with sharp glasses and neatly tied hair, typing quickly on her computer. The receptionist barely looked up. "Yes, can I help you?" The little girl straightened her back and tried to speak as clearly as possible. I came for the meeting with the CEO." The receptionist blinked, confused. She finally raised her eyes and looked over the desk at the child. "Excuse me, this is a corporate office. Are you lost?" "No, ma'am," the girl said softly but firmly. "My mama was supposed to come, but she is ill, so I came instead." The receptionist's mouth fell slightly open. For a second, she didn't know whether to laugh or scold. "You can't just walk in here for your mother. This is an important meeting. Do you even know who you're asking to see?" The little girl nodded seriously. "The CEO, the millionaire man in the big office. My mama said this meeting was very important. She couldn't come, but I promised I would." Her innocence made the receptionist pause. She glanced around, noticing a few employees nearby whispering and watching. There was something in the girl's voice, pure determination, that made it hard to simply dismiss her. Still, rules were rules. "Wait here," the receptionist said finally, picking up the phone. She whispered quickly to someone upstairs, explaining the odd situation. When she hung up, she looked at the girl with narrowed eyes. "The CEO's assistant is on the way. Don't move." Minutes later, a tall man in a grey suit approached. He looked important, with a polished watch and papers in his hand. He bent slightly to the child's height. "Are you the one here for the meeting?" "Yes, sir," she said, her small hands clasped together. "Mama is sick, so I came instead," the assistant frowned. "This is highly unusual." He studied her for a long moment. She looked nervous, but her eyes were steady, not afraid. Something about her composure surprised him. After a deep breath, he said, "All right, come with me." Gasps followed as the little girl was escorted past security and into the golden elevators. Employees stared, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others whispering, "What is she doing here?" Inside the elevator, the walls were polished so bright she could see her reflection. She smoothed her dress and whispered, "You can do this." The assistant pressed the button for the top floor, and the elevator began to rise. Her ears popped as it climbed higher and higher. When the doors opened, she stepped into a long hallway with soft carpets and tall doors. At the very end was a door larger than the rest, with shiny brass handles. The assistant gestured toward it. "That's the CEO's office." Her heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to run back down, to escape the strange world of tall buildings and serious faces. But then she thought of her mother lying weak in bed, whispering about the job that could save their family. She clenched her fists and walked forward. She pushed open the heavy door slowly. The office inside was enormous. Walls of glass revealed the whole city below, and the desk was long and made of dark wood. Behind it sat a man with silver hair and a sharp suit looking at papers. He glanced up, expecting to see a grown woman. Instead, he saw a little girl in a plain dress standing in the doorway. He raised an eyebrow, surprised. "And who are you?" The girl stepped inside, her small shoes clicking softly on the floor. She stood tall even though her knees shook. "I am here for my mama," she said. "She is ill, so I came instead." For the first time that morning, the CEO put his papers down. He leaned back in his chair, studying the tiny figure before him. His eyes narrowed with curiosity. No one had ever walked into his office like this. Not an investor, not a businessman, and certainly not a child. He gestured to the chair in front of his desk. "Come closer," he said. "Let's hear what you have to say." And in that moment, the girl realized she was no longer just her mother's daughter. She was about to face a test that could change both their lives forever. The CEO leaned back in his chair, still staring at the little girl in disbelief. He had seen hundreds of people sit in front of him, businessmen in expensive suits, graduates with polished speeches, leaders who wanted deals, but never a child. He folded his arms and said slowly, "So, your mother was supposed to meet me, and instead she sent you." The little girl shook her head quickly. "No, sir. Mama didn't send me. She's too sick. She told me she couldn't go, and she was crying because she wanted to. So I told her I would come." Her honesty struck him. He raised an eyebrow. "And what did you think you could do here? Do you even know what this meeting is about?" "Do you even know what this meeting is about?" The girl hesitated for a second, then answered in a small voice. "It was about a job. Mama said it could change everything. We don't have much money, and she works so hard. She was so excited to meet you. I thought, maybe if I come I can tell you how good she is. Maybe you'll give her a chance." The CEO sat in silence. He had expected excuses, maybe even lies. Instead, he heard the pure truth from a child's mouth. Her eyes were wide but steady, filled with innocence and determination. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "All right," he said, curious. "Then tell me, why should I hire your mother?" The little girl clasped her hands tightly, her feet barely touching the ground from the tall chair. She thought hard, then said softly, "Because she never gives up. Even when she's tired, she works. When she doesn't eat, she makes sure I do. She tells me that no matter how poor we are, we must be honest and kind. If you give her a chance, she won't waste it." Her words were not polished like those of grown-ups. She didn't talk about skills, numbers, or resumes. But her voice carried something stronger: truth. The CEO felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. He remembered his own childhood, the days when his mother had worked endlessly to feed him. He remembered watching her sacrifice and telling himself he would one day become rich so she would never suffer again. Looking at the little girl, he saw a reflection of his younger self. He cleared his throat, trying to mask the emotion rising in him. "And what about you?" he asked, testing her. "What do you want from me?" The little girl blinked. "I don't want anything, sir. I only want Mama to get better. And if she works here, maybe she won't worry so much. Maybe she can buy medicine. Maybe she can smile again." Her simple words hit him harder than the most persuasive business pitch. For years, he had heard people beg for opportunities, but always with hidden agendas. This was different. She wanted nothing for herself, only hope for her mother. The CEO leaned back, tapping his pen on the desk. He studied her small frame, her worn dress, her polished but oversized shoes. She looked out of place in his giant office. Yet somehow she belonged there more than most who had ever sat in that chair. "You know," he said slowly, "this is not how things are usually done. Children don't come to business meetings. CEOs don't take advice from little girls." The girl's eyes dropped to the floor. For the first time, doubt filled her. Maybe she had made a mistake. Maybe everyone had been right to laugh at her for even trying. She whispered, "I'm sorry if I wasted your time. I just didn't want Mama to lose her chance." The CEO was silent for a long moment. Then unexpectedly he said, "Look at me." The girl raised her eyes, nervous. "Do you know what courage is?" he asked. She tilted her head slightly. "Being brave even when you're scared." He nodded slowly. "Yes, and do you know what you just did? You walked into the tallest building in the city, into the office of a man everyone fears, and you told me the truth without shaking. That is courage." Her lips parted slightly, surprised. No one had ever said that to her. The CEO leaned back again, his expression softening. "Your mother must be a remarkable woman if she raised a daughter like you." The little girl's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away quickly. "She is, sir. She's the best." At that moment, the CEO made a quiet decision in his heart. This meeting would not end the way anyone expected. He stood up, walked around his desk, and knelt so he was at her eye level. His voice was gentle now, not sharp like before. "Tell your mother this," he said. "She doesn't need to worry. She already has the job, and she has my respect." The girl's breath caught. She stared at him in disbelief. "Really? You mean it?" He smiled faintly. "Yes, and more than that, I want to meet her. Not as a CEO meeting an employee. But as a man meeting the woman who raised the bravest little girl I've ever seen, the little girl's tears finally fell, rolling down her cheeks. She nodded quickly, her heart racing with joy. "Thank you, sir." "Thank you." For the first time in many years, the CEO felt something money had never given him, the warmth of doing the right thing. And as he watched the little girl wipe her tears and smile, he realized this moment would stay with him forever. The next morning, the little girl woke up with a smile brighter than she had in months. She rushed to her mother's bedside and whispered, "Mama, he said you have the job." "The CEO himself said it." Her mother blinked, struggling to believe. "What? Child, don't make up stories." "I'm not." The girl insisted, her eyes glowing. "He said you already have the job and he wants to meet you." The mother's weak hand covered her mouth in shock. How could this be true? CEOs were known for being cold, distant, untouchable. Yet her little girl had walked into his office and returned with hope. Tears filled her eyes. "You are my brave angel," she whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. Later that day, while the girl helped her mother sit up and eat a little soup, there was a knock on the door. Their tiny apartment rarely had visitors, and the sound startled them. The girl jumped up and opened the door, and froze. There, standing in the doorway, was the CEO himself. He was not surrounded by assistants or bodyguards. He wasn't dressed in a sharp suit either, only in a simple shirt and jacket. Behind him, a driver carried a basket filled with fruit, bread, and medicine. "Good afternoon," the CEO said kindly, lowering his head slightly. "May I come in?" The little girl's jaw dropped. She had expected him to keep his promise, but not like this. Not standing in their cramped hallway with a smile that seemed genuine. Her mother struggled to stand, but the CEO quickly raised a hand. "Please don't, you're unwell. I just wanted to meet you, as I promised your daughter." He stepped inside, and for the first time he saw how they truly lived. The apartment was small, with peeling paint on the walls, a broken lamp in the corner, and only 2 chairs at the table. The air smelled faintly of medicine and broth, yet everything was tidy. The bed was neatly made, the dishes stacked clean, and on the wall hung a small picture the little girl had drawn, her and her mother holding hands in front of a house. The CEO's chest tightened. He had spent years surrounded by wealth, marble floors, chandeliers, gold pens. But here, in this tiny room, he saw something money could never buy. Dignity. The mother's voice was weak but steady. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Thank you for believing my daughter. She should not have troubled you." The CEO shook his head firmly. "She did not trouble me. In fact, she reminded me of something I had forgotten." The mother tilted her head, confused. "What is that?" "That courage and honesty are worth more than resumes and fancy words," he said softly. "Your daughter walked into my office with nothing but truth. It was the bravest thing I have seen in a long time." The mother's eyes filled with tears. She looked at her daughter, who stood proudly by her side. "She has always been brave," the mother whispered. "She is all I have, and she keeps me alive every day." The CEO sat down at their table, something he had not done in years, sit at a simple wooden table with no polish, no assistants. He asked about their lives, about the mother's health, about the struggles they faced. He listened quietly, not as a powerful businessman, but as a man who wanted to understand. The little girl watched him closely. She noticed how his expression softened when her mother coughed, how his eyes flickered with sadness when he saw the half-empty medicine bottles. For the first time, he looked less like a giant figure in a skyscraper and more like a person, someone who cared. Finally, the CEO said, "You do not need to worry anymore. Your job is ready for you whenever you recover. Until then, I will make sure you get the medical help you need. And your daughter." He looked at the little girl and smiled gently. "She deserves an education that matches her courage. I will make sure she goes to the best school," the mother gasped, her hands trembling. "Sir, we could never repay you." "You don't have to," he interrupted. "You've already given me something priceless. Your daughter reminded me of humanity. That is a gift no money can buy." Silence filled the room, heavy with gratitude. The mother cried quietly, covering her face with her hands. The little girl threw her arms around the CEO's waist, surprising him. For a moment he froze, unused to such affection. Then slowly he placed a hand on her back. In that small apartment something shifted inside him. For years he had lived surrounded by wealth but starved of warmth. And here in this modest home he felt richer than ever. When he finally left that evening, he paused at the doorway and said, "This is not charity. This is respect. I see strength in this home, and from now on you are not alone." As the door closed behind him, the mother and daughter sat in silence, holding each other tightly. For the first time in a long while, they felt safe. Hope had walked through their door in the form of a man they had once thought was untouchable, and for the CEO, walking back to his car, he realized that the meeting in his grand office had not just changed their lives, it had changed his too. The days after the CEO's visit felt like a dream for the little girl and her mother. For so long, their lives had been filled with worry about rent, food, and medicine. But now something had shifted. The CEO's words echoed in their minds. "From now on, you are not alone." Echoed in their minds. "From now on, you are not alone." The very next morning, a car pulled up outside their small apartment. A doctor and 2 nurses stepped out, carrying bags of medicine. They introduced themselves politely, saying, "The CEO sent us. We're here to make sure your mother gets the care she needs." The mother's eyes widened in shock. Never before had she been treated with such importance. The doctor checked her lungs, her fever, and her overall condition. New medicines were placed neatly on the bedside table. The nurses explained when and how to take them. It was as if a cloud of fear had lifted from the room. The little girl sat nearby, her heart bursting with relief. She had always tried to be strong, but she hated seeing her mother suffer. Now, for the first time, she felt like her mother's pain was finally being taken seriously. Meanwhile, at his office, the CEO sat in his high-backed chair, staring out at the city skyline. But his thoughts weren't on business deals or profits. They were on a small apartment, a sick mother, and a little girl with courage bigger than any boardroom speech. For years he had lived with numbers, contracts, balance sheets, percentages. But that child's words, "I just want Mama to get better," had touched him more deeply than any deal worth millions. He called his assistant. "I want to know everything about that family," he said. "Their bills, their rent, their needs. Quietly, no publicity. I want them to live with dignity, not pity." The assistant nodded and got to work. Within a week, arrangements were made. The landlord received a letter confirming their rent had been paid in advance for the next 2 years. A local grocery store was instructed to deliver fresh food weekly, all costs covered. A scholarship form was prepared with the little girl's name on it, guaranteeing her education through high school. But the CEO didn't stop there. One afternoon, he personally visited again, this time with papers. The mother was sitting up in bed, looking stronger already, and the girl rushed to open the door with a wide grin. "Sir," she said excitedly, "Mama's getting better. The doctor says the new medicine is working." The CEO's heart warmed at her joy. He stepped inside and handed the mother a folder. "This is your official contract," he explained. "When you recover, this will be your job at my company. You won't be in the lowest position either. I want you in a role where your hard work can shine." The mother's hands trembled as she touched the folder. "Sir, this is too much. I don't deserve all this." The CEO looked at her firmly. "You do, because you raised a daughter who walked into my office with more courage than most men I've met. That kind of strength doesn't come by accident. It comes from you." The mother's eyes filled with tears and she whispered, "Thank you. I don't know how we will ever repay you." The CEO smiled faintly. "You already have. Your daughter reminded me what truly matters. I used to think success was measured in money. Now I know it's measured in lives touched." The little girl beamed, her small hands clapping with excitement. "See, Mama, I told you he would listen." From that day on, the CEO made it a habit to check on them, not as a boss, not as a rich man handing out charity, but as a friend. He often sat at their table, eating simple soup with them, listening to their laughter. One evening, As the three of them sat together, the girl showed him her school books. She pointed proudly at her handwriting, her drawings, her sums. "One day," she said shyly, "I want to be smart like Mama, or maybe even like you." The CEO chuckled softly. "No, little one. Be smart like yourself. That's more powerful than being like anyone else." Her mother watched the exchange with quiet amazement. She had never seen her daughter so full of hope. She had also never seen the CEO so relaxed, so human. The man who once ruled boardrooms with iron decisions now laughed at a child's jokes and listened with patience to her stories. The world outside continued as always, fast, cold, chasing after money. But inside that small apartment, something extraordinary had begun. A sick mother was healing. A little girl was dreaming bigger than ever. And a millionaire, once hardened by business, was learning how compassion could build more than any skyscraper. For the CEO, helping them was not a business decision. It was a promise he had made to himself. Never again would he overlook the quiet voices, the simple truths. He realized that sometimes the most powerful lessons didn't come from books, strategies, or board meetings. They came from the courage of a child who walked into his office and said, "Mom's ill, so I came instead." That sentence had changed everything, and as the family's life slowly transformed, the CEO knew this was only the beginning. He had resources, power, and wealth, but now he had something even greater: purpose. Weeks passed, and slowly the mother grew stronger. The medicine, regular checkups, and proper food made her look less pale. The coughs that once shook her thin frame came less often, and her voice regained its gentle warmth. Every day, the little girl reminded her, "Mama, you're getting better because someone believed in us." The mother often shook her head in wonder. "I still don't understand why a man like him, so rich, so powerful, cares about people like us." Her daughter always answered with the same innocent wisdom. "Because I told him the truth, Mama, and sometimes the truth is stronger than money." By the end of the month, the mother could walk to the kitchen without losing her breath. She began helping with small chores, though her daughter fussed over her like a nurse. The CEO continued to visit, sometimes bringing food, sometimes just bringing time. To the little girl, his visits felt normal now. She would run to the door, her smile wide, as if greeting a family member. One evening he arrived carrying a bag of fruit. The mother, now sitting upright at the table, greeted him with a shy smile. "Sir, you've done more than enough for us already. You don't need to keep coming." The CEO sat down across from her, shaking his head. "Please stop calling me sir. I want to be here. Not as a CEO, just as a man who owes your daughter and you more than I can say." The mother lowered her gaze, still unused to kindness that came without strings attached. "You gave me back dignity," she whispered, "and that's not something we can ever repay." The little girl listened quietly, her eyes darting between them. She didn't fully understand the grown-up words, but she could feel something important happening, something bigger than money or jobs. As the weeks turned into 2 months, the mother grew well enough to start working again. The day she walked into the CEO's company for the first time, she wore a borrowed blazer, simple slacks, and shoes that pinched her feet. She held her daughter's hand tightly as they entered the shining building. Employees whispered when they saw her. Some already knew the story, how her little girl had once walked into the CEO's office with nothing but honesty. Many had doubted it at first, but seeing her now, walking confidently beside her child, they felt respect. The CEO greeted her personally at the lobby, something he had never done for any employee. "Welcome," he said warmly. "This company isn't just gaining a worker, it's gaining strength." He introduced her to the staff, making sure they treated her not as a charity case, but as someone who had earned her place. For the first time in years, the mother felt like she belonged. She was no longer just a sick woman struggling to survive, she was part of something bigger. Meanwhile, the little girl continued her schooling with the scholarship. She often visited her mother's office after class, running through the halls with curiosity. Employees smiled and waved at her, calling her the brave one. One afternoon, she walked into the CEO's office holding her homework book. "Can you help me with this math question?" she asked boldly. The CEO, surrounded by papers worth millions, pushed them aside and chuckled. "Of course. Let's see." He bent down, patiently explaining, his finger tracing the numbers. To him, teaching her how to divide felt more important than signing contracts. The mother watched from the doorway, her eyes soft. She saw how gently he treated her daughter, how his sharp businessman's face melted into warmth. Something inside her shifted. For years, she had thought of rich men as distant, unreachable. But this man had stepped into their lives not with wealth, but with humanity. Still, she worried. Late at night, as she lay awake, she asked herself, why us? Why does he keep giving? Was it pity? Was it guilt? Or was it something else, something she dared not name? The CEO, in his own quiet moments, also wrestled with questions. He had built his empire by keeping emotions locked away, by focusing only on numbers and results. Yet this family had broken through his walls. The little girl's bravery, the mother's quiet dignity, they had reminded him of the boy he once was, poor and hungry, watching his own mother sacrifice everything. One evening, after work, he walked with the mother and daughter to their apartment. The little girl skipped ahead, humming a tune, while he and the mother walked slowly behind. "You've changed me," he admitted suddenly, his voice low. The mother looked at him, surprised. "How? I used to think money was everything," he said, staring at the streetlights. "But your daughter showed me something I'd forgotten. That kindness is more powerful than wealth. And you reminded me of my own mother. Strong, selfless, always putting her child first." The mother's throat tightened. She wanted to reply, but words failed her. For a moment they walked in silence, the weight of unspoken emotions between them. When they reached the apartment, the little girl ran back and hugged both of them at once. "We're like a team now," she said brightly. "Like a team now," she said brightly. The CEO laughed softly, the sound rare and genuine. He looked at the mother and said, "Yes, we are." That night, as he drove back to his mansion, the CEO realized something. The skyscraper he had built with money had never made him feel full. But this tiny family, living in a small apartment, had given him something no wealth could buy: belonging. And for the mother, lying in bed later, she whispered a silent prayer of thanks. Not for the money, not for the job, but for the miracle that her daughter's courage had brought into their lives. The company had always been known for its strictness. Employees walked the halls in silence, meetings were tense, and everyone felt the pressure of numbers and deadlines. But after the story of the little girl spread, something in the atmosphere began to change. It started quietly. Workers who had once rushed past each other without a word now began to greet one another. Managers who had only focused on results started asking about their team's well-being. People whispered, "If a child can walk into the CEO's office and speak the truth, maybe we can too." The CEO noticed the shift. For years, his company had been built on rules, fear, and efficiency. But now there was laughter in the cafeteria. Employees stayed behind after work to help each other. It wasn't weakness, it was strength. The story of the girl and her mother had touched something deep in everyone. One day, during a meeting, an employee stood up and said, "Sir, I think our company should start a program to help families like hers. There are many out there who just need someone to listen." The room went silent. Before, no one would have dared suggest something so bold. But the CEO smiled faintly. "That," he said, "is the best idea I've heard in years. Let's make it happen." And so the company launched a new initiative, providing scholarships, medical support, and opportunities to families struggling with illness or poverty. The employees themselves volunteered, donating their time and skills. What had started with one little girl's courage was now rippling across an entire organization. Meanwhile, the mother worked diligently in her new position. She wasn't the most educated, but she had grit and heart. She listened, she learned quickly, and she treated everyone with respect. Colleagues admired her because she never complained, never asked for special treatment. Instead, she quietly proved her worth. The little girl, now thriving in her school, often visited the office. She became something of a symbol for the company. People would smile when she walked through the doors, whispering, "That's the brave one." She had no idea how much hope she carried just by being herself. But the biggest change was in the CEO himself. Once known for his cold decisions and distant personality, he began walking the floors of his company, greeting employees by name. He stopped rushing through meetings and started listening more. His sharp eyes softened when he spoke, and his laughter, rare in the past, became more common. One afternoon, he stood in the middle of the office floor with the mother and daughter beside him. Reporters had gathered, eager to capture the moment. The CEO raised his hand and said, "This company used to measure success in profits. But today, I tell you, true success is measured in lives touched." This family reminded me of that truth. The crowd erupted in applause, not just because of his words, but because they saw the proof in his actions. Yet, outside the walls of the company, the story spread even further. Newspapers wrote about the CEO who changed after a little girl walked into his office. Schools invited Maria, the girl, to share her experience with students. Communities spoke about kindness, courage, and second chances. For the mother, the attention was overwhelming. She had always lived quietly, never expecting to be noticed. Now strangers approached her with respect. But she never let it go to her head. She always said, "The real hero is my daughter. I just followed her example." The CEO, however, had a different view. One evening, while visiting their home, he said softly, "No, you're both heroes. You taught me that kindness builds stronger foundations than money ever could." The little girl giggled. "So, we're a team of heroes now." The CEO laughed, shaking his head. "Yes, but don't tell anyone. They might expect us to wear capes." They all laughed together. The kind of laughter that came from shared struggles and victories. As the months went by, the company's new initiatives reached families across the city. Children who had once dropped out of school returned to classrooms. Mothers received medical care. Fathers found jobs. People began calling it the kindness revolution. And in the middle of it all was the little girl who once polished her too big shoes, straightened her plain dress, and walked nervously into a skyscraper. She never forgot that day. Whenever she looked at her mother, now healthier and stronger, or at the CEO, who had become more like family than a stranger, she felt proud. She realized something powerful. Even small voices could be heard. Even small steps could shake tall towers. The CEO, too, often reflected on it. Sitting in his large office with a view of the city, he sometimes caught himself staring at the chair across his desk, the one where a little girl had once sat, her feet dangling, her voice trembling but steady. He knew that moment had rewritten his life. In the end, the company didn't just change policies. It changed its heart, and all because a sick mother and her brave daughter reminded everyone, from workers to millionaires, that compassion is never weakness. It is the greatest strength. Years passed since the day the little girl first walked into the CEO's towering office with nothing but courage in her heart. What began as one small act had grown into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. The mother had fully recovered. She worked proudly at the company, respected by her colleagues not because of pity, but because of her skill and determination. She carried herself with quiet dignity, always remembering the days when even medicine was a struggle. And whenever people asked about her job, she would smile and say, "I got here because my daughter believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." The little girl, once shy and worried, had blossomed. With her scholarship, she studied hard, excelling in school. She carried with her the same honesty and courage that had once startled the CEO. Teachers often said, "She speaks like someone much older than her years." But the girl always laughed and replied, "That's just because I learned from Mama." The CEO himself had changed in ways people still found hard to believe. No longer was he the cold, distant man known only for building empires of glass and steel. Now he was recognized as a leader with heart. Employees spoke of him with respect, not fear. Communities across the city knew him not just as a millionaire, But as a man who had listened to a child and allowed her truth to reshape him, the company's kindness revolution had spread across the nation. Other corporations began adopting similar programs, scholarships, medical support, family aid, because they had seen how one act of compassion could ripple outward. Soon, people in other countries began writing letters, asking for guidance to start their own initiatives. What began in one office had grown into a global movement, but for the little girl, the story was never about fame or headlines. She still remembered the fear she felt when she first opened those heavy glass doors. She remembered her mother's weak voice telling her it was impossible. And she remembered the CEO's eyes, narrowing with surprise when she sat in his chair and said, "Mom's ill." So I came instead. One evening years later, the three of them sat together in the company's new community center. The walls were decorated with photos of families who had been helped, children who had received scholarships, and nurses who had been trained through the program. The little girl, now older, traced her finger over one photo of a smiling boy holding a backpack. "He got to go to school because of this place," she said proudly. The CEO nodded. "And he will grow up to change someone else's life, just like you changed mine." The girl blushed. "I didn't change your life. I just told you the truth." The CEO leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful smile on his face. "Sometimes truth is the most powerful thing in the world, but it takes courage to say it. That day you gave me courage I had lost." The mother reached across the table, her eyes shining. "And you gave us dignity. You reminded us we were not invisible. That's something we will never forget." The room grew quiet, filled with unspoken gratitude. The three of them had come from such different worlds, one from wealth, one from struggle, and one from innocence. Yet somehow they had built a bond that no title or money could measure. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The little girl looked out the window and whispered, "Mama, do you remember the day I first went to his office?" The mother laughed softly. "I remember being terrified you'd get lost in that big building. But you came back with hope instead." The CEO smiled warmly. "That day was the beginning of everything. You walked into my office, and the world hasn't been the same since." Years later, when the story was told in schools and community centers, people didn't speak only about the millionaire or the mother. They spoke about the little girl, the one who had dared to face giants with nothing but honesty. They said, "She reminded us that even the smallest voice can echo loudly if it speaks the truth." The mother continued to work at the company until she no longer needed to. But even after, she dedicated herself to helping other struggling families.